Well, good morning. So this video is going to be titled something like Ukraine Cannot Win This War. And it is a war. They call it a special military operation, but anytime a soldier is dying on the field, trust me, it is a war. Ukraine will not win this war. It's not only is it impossible, not only do our military leaders know this, we can go back into history and just prove out certain facts by comparing wars of the past to know that Ukraine cannot win this war. And it's not just because Russia is a superpower with nuclear weapons, okay? This is a very special deal here where Russia has gone in. They didn't invade all of Ukraine. It's not that they couldn't, they could have. It probably would have been a declaration of war to do so, but they didn't. Instead, they wisely called it a special military operation to justify the invasion into ethnic Russian territory that has traditionally been ethnic Russian. And that's where they've stopped. Now, in the beginning, they had tried to expand up north, and I guess they, I'm not sure why they did that. But the current boundary that's been there for the past year or so really hasn't changed. Russia has not advanced beyond that point, and Ukraine has not advanced to repel the Russian invasion. And there's a very good reason for that, because Russia has trenched in, and they have 3 rows of trenches that are heavily mined. And that is why the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed so miserably. And they cannot overcome that. And there's very clear reasons for it. Ukraine does not have an effective air force. The F-16s, if they get them, or if they're using them now, are in very short supply. It is not a top-of-the-line fighter or attack aircraft. They can outfit it with some awesome weapons, but it really comes down to the training of your pilots. And you can ask any pilot in any branch of the U.S. military. It requires a lot of training. So what they're having to do is compress that training to get Ukrainian pilots into the air. And not only for that, but also to put a gun in their hand to send them to the front. I saw a news clip of amputated Ukrainian soldiers that got injured, and they healed up, and they still wanted to participate, so they gave them a job. Okay, you can train new recruits going to the front. But this training is very compressed. The instructors were complaining about that. We don't have the time to give them everything they need. So they've set up a course that has like poles and places to hide behind. And they're training squads how to advance so they don't shoot themselves, and they can provide each other cover. So it's just very basic training on how to conduct an assault. And the reason it's so compressed is because the high attrition rate is just, it's a Russian meat grinder. Make no mistake about that. And they're not really, okay, one of our, I believe it was CBS, said that the Ukrainian troop losses are devastating, right? So we're starting to hear this now, but the counteroffensive that was supposed to have gone so well has failed miserably. And now we're starting to hear these words, these admissions that Ukraine is taking heavy losses. So let's look at the economy of both countries. Ukraine is $200 billion a year, and they virtually have no industry. They have really no war-making capacity. Now, when you consider that the NATO weaponry that is being given to Ukraine, you could technically say, well, that's their industry, but they're not the ones making it. They're receiving it. And if you're not making your own military hardware, you are less apt to understand it. And what they're getting requires a technical training to use, but they're being given very condensed training, and that's not going to help them. It's only going to hurt them because it emboldens them to put that into the fight. And when you're going up against a superpower like Russia, they're being quickly beat back. The Russian economy, their GDP is about 2 trillion, right? So it's about 10 times bigger than the Ukrainian GDP. And for historical context, the United States, our economy in 1941 against Japan, we were about 10 times bigger than Japan. Since we're on the World War II comparison analogy, you could talk about these drones that are getting a lot of media coverage. And everybody, we've called everything a game changer. The Leopard tanks are a game changer. Well, most of them have been taken out. They are no longer game changers. All these different technologies in the past, this is a game changer. Yeah, well, they've all failed. The latest game changer are these drones, quote unquote game changer. And they're not. For context, go back to World War II. The first drone was a kamikaze aircraft by Japan, where it was a manned kamikaze that they would fly into U.S. ships. They sank 34 U.S. ships during World War II with kamikaze aircraft, and they damaged hundreds more. But that had no effect on altering the war. And that is the same thing with these drones. These are harassment weapons. They are meant to instill fear, which is why they're being sent into Moscow, the bridge, and also these ships, Russian Navy ships. They're just not having the impact. But they make good headlines, right? And everybody jumps on board. Yay, go Ukraine, Slava Ukraine, whatever it is. And that is truly tragic for the simple reason that we are only encouraging the meat grinder of Ukrainian troops to go in and get killed. And that's exactly what's happening. All of these drone attacks, the reprisals have been large, right? So Ukraine is suffering the most by the drone attacks that they are sending over into Russia. And this is happening in a variety of ways. We're seeing the missile strikes into western Ukraine that primarily are targeting ammunition depots. They're trying to see where the NATO weaponry is going so they can take it out. They leveled a Patriot missile battery that way. And there have been also civilian deaths associated with that. But you will have civilian deaths associated with any war. I mean, we had in the United States, same thing in Iraq, where we would target depending on where the weapons were, our excuse was, well, they had a radar up there. That's why we blew up the hospital. Okay. I mean, that's war. That's the nature of war. You're going to have civilians. Any civilian that dies in a war is an unnecessary death, but there's no way to sanitize that, and we could throw World War II back into it, right? We were trying to go after Japan's industry, and we nuked 80,000 civilians in one city and 75,000 in another, and we firebombed Yokohama, okay, killing hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians. So, and there's been no direct apology from the United States. There's been sorrow and grief, but we always justify our actions for our survival, and that is what Russia is doing today. So another reason why Ukraine will not win this war is because of the ethnic territory that Russia is holding on to. Okay, these are ethnic Russians. The vast majority took a vote Doesn't matter if you believe in the vote or not, but the vast majority are ethnic Russians. There are some that do not want it, especially everybody in Western Ukraine. They want their country intact. Another reason they will not win is because they have publicly said that they're not going to stop fighting until they drive Russia out of Crimea and these territories. That's not going to happen. Okay, I mean, that would be, you have to understand why Russia did this in the first place. Okay, it's a state security issue with Russia. Okay, you don't backtrack on a state security issue, no matter what the peace talks are, right? So that's not going to happen. So we're kind of like we're looking at a very long conflict, right? That Ukraine is not going to be able to sustain, no matter how many weapons you put in there or how many billions you give Ukraine. It's a manpower issue, right? So the only way you overcome a manpower issue is with NATO, sending NATO troops in. Is that a possibility? Short of a false flag, I would say no, because then you have the United States in direct war with Russia, and nobody wants that. At least publicly, that's what they say. Nobody wants that. So Ukraine is in a no-win situation. Russian troops, on the other hand, they began this conflict with 400,000 troops, 500,000 troops, and Putin called up his reserves, and they now have 750,000 troops. And these are well-trained troops. They're not going through condensed training programs. They're getting their full training, and they're being rotated in, right? As opposed to Ukraine, it's almost like a just-in-time delivery of a soldier with a gun in his hand. Okay, so that is going to determine the outcome of this war, is the training of the military soldier. So there's no way they can overcome that. Not with unless they called a ceasefire and trained up a whole bunch of people and then just went back at it again. But this day-to-day combat and trying to push the Russians out is it's not working out for them. So what do we do? Well, short of no wise leaders in the world that know how to negotiate our way out of this, it's only going to expand. And that would mean that NATO will get involved. And if that were to happen, I believe that nuclear warfare is inevitable, because Russia knows they cannot defeat NATO. They know that, right? So, but if they begin fighting NATO troops, eventually by attrition, now they start to lose. Okay, and I don't think that they would allow themselves to, be put into shambles before they use nuclear weapons, because part of the command and control structure that depends on a strong military. Once you start taking unacceptable losses and you're losing territory and you're being pushed back, that has a huge morale busting effect on your military, including those that are in charge of nuclear buttons. So I don't think Russia would wait. I don't think that they would accept giving away any territory that they've had, especially in the Crimea. And the only direction this has to go, there's only two ways, is a prolonged conflict and where Ukraine just has no chance, or NATO involvement, and now it's World War III. So those are my thoughts. I do follow Colonel Douglas McGregor, his videos. I believe he is spot on with his military assessment of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and as well as global events. So here with my aircraft carrier, my job was working on these flight decks here, and I just loved it. It was just so cool. It was so awesome. We even I was on the Coral Sea one time, and we had a Russian bear that flew over our flat top without escort. And that very rarely happened back then, because we had alerts. We had the Alert 5. They'd be on the catapults, and they'd get the Russian Bear on the radar. They'd launch the F4 Phantoms to go chase it down, or the A7s. And but on this particular occasion, we were in transit, in like a fast transit, and it was overcast and stuff like that. We just didn't have time. We didn't even have the alert on deck. I don't know if they surprised us and they were in an area that we didn't expect them to be in, but they buzzed us, man, and it was pretty awesome. Just I was there on deck. I saw it. Hey. Anyway, this is the Cold War Sailor. Thank you for watching this.